Hello, sunshine. I'm Alexi, Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. Joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. We come to you after the U.S. has just bombed out of the 2023 Women's World Cup. They could not get it done against Sweden, despite playing what I think everybody would agree was their best game of the tournament. Mosse, initial thoughts, as I said, I think that even somebody who does not particularly like this team would have to look at this, and at least in this moment, for this, 120 minutes, this was the best that we have seen. Now, I don't think anybody necessarily was surprised that the United States lost to Sweden in this World Cup, but the manner in which they lost it, I think, is surprising.
It's a weird one because the performance was great. They were the much better team. It's an absolute travesty that they got knocked out. So it feels like a weird night to be hammering them, but then you take a step back, big picture, going out in the round of 16 is a massive failure.
It's a travesty in what sense?
In terms of the
balance
balance
that they were the
play.
better team?
Yeah, they were the much better team. They ran into an all-time great goalkeeping performance by Musovic. The save on Lindsey Horan in the second half.
Because Lindsey got all of it, and it was headed right for the corner.
Is one of the best you will ever see at this level. And then there was another one on an Alex Morgan header, and lots of other ones too. She was absolutely incredible. She is the hero of this game for Sweden, no question. Yeah, so the U.S. was desperately unlucky. They did everything right, but the soccer gods can be cruel. And yet, if you look at this game in a vacuum, then the U.S. was unlucky. But if you take a step back and look at the whole picture, you know, there are things to criticize.
Yes. In totality, this was a failure of a World Cup. From a historic perspective, this is something that's never been done before, in that every single World Cup, the U.S. has, at the very least, finished third. And so bombing out in the round of 16, despite a good performance in that round of 16 games, I think fairly, at least the way I look at it, is that it is an unmitigated failure. And I think that it, hastens, if you will, the examination of what this team is, what this team isn't. And as I said in previous pods, the concern for me is while everybody else has progressed, which is natural and something that we should actually welcome because it's good for the game and it's good for the World Cup and it's good for the sport, the U.S., rather than also progressing, certainly not at the same rate as everybody else, but has regressed. And I think that was ultimately on display through this team. I do think that this particular World Cup team in 2023 was not as good as the 2019 team and was not as good as the 2015 team, even with the rest of the world, quote unquote, catching up. Having said that, tonight there were some good performances. I thought that Vlatko Andonovski, in terms of making changes, got it right with Sonnet coming in for Rose Lavelle. And keep in mind that Sonnet is a center-back-ish type of player coming in that midfield, and she didn't look out of place. As a matter of fact, she was one of the players that I thought had a really, really good game. Naomi Girma confirmed that she is the one and only star to come out of this tournament and shown from start to finish in that back, and she is a wonderful player for the future. And I think, barring an injury, and I hope she stays healthy, she's going to be there for a long time in that center back position going forward. Alyssa Nair, I think, commanded the box well in a way that we talked about she needed to do because of the set pieces coming out, punching it, and then not only making the saves in the penalty kick, but also making a penalty kick herself. So I thought that ultimately was good. And just in general, the whole team felt more cohesive, felt more organized, felt like there was much more focus and understanding as to what they wanted to do this game, except for the most important thing, Mosse, in our game, which is putting the ball in the back of the net.
There was a curious moment in our post-game show in which Rob Stone tried to suggest that Lindsey Horan had been the U.S.'s best player at this World Cup, and you were not having it.
It's one of those things where, Rob was doing his out to a commercial or whatever, and it had just come off an interview with Lindsey Horan, who, by the way, had talked about Naomi Girma as being one of the bright shining lights of this tournament. And then I don't know what Rob was saying, and there was like this small delay, and I just couldn't let it go. I probably should have let it go, But I just wanted to make sure that in that moment when everybody is watching that, because I thought that Naomi Girma in totality over the tournament was better than Lindsey Horan. And Rob made it seem like, I love when Rob has opinion. He doesn't like to have opinion, but I love when Rob Stone has opinion. If you ever get a chance to sit down with Rob Stone, he's incredibly interesting. He knows a whole lot about the game, and in his capacity to host, he doesn't get to give enough of his opinion. So I love the fact that that was his opinion, and we went back and forth on it. But I was not going to stand for him just saying that and not having anything in terms of a comeback relative to Naomi Girma.
Well, on Vlatko Andonovski, I agree with you. He nailed the starting lineup. The introduction of Sonnet proved to be a stroke of genius. The U.S. played with so much intensity in the midfield. Their pressing gave Sweden all sorts of problems, so hats off to Vlatko there. But there still is this issue of his reluctance to make substitutions. He made one in the second half. Lynn Williams came on for Trinity Rodman, and that was a forced one because Rodman had been ill in the lead-up to the match, so we were told that her minutes were going to be limited regardless.
Yeah, and you could see her coughing on the sideline, and so there was a sickness. But she played well, actually, through that game. But that, she needed to make a change. And Lynn Williams came in. Her speed was awesome down that right-hand side.
So that was it in the 90 minutes. And then he brought on Rapinoe in the extra time. And then I'm not even going to count the last two, O'Hara and Mewis, because they came on just to take the penalties. So it was essentially two real subs in 120 minutes of action, which, again, is curious to me. He seems to be of this belief that making any change is going to completely disrupt the flow of the team. So if the team is playing well, which they were, to be fair, why would he mess with that? But I don't know. To me, it's not that big an issue to make one change and still maintain the same shape, the same style of play, and just get fresher legs at a certain position. I don't know why he's so reluctant to do that.
It also it goes against what coaches have kind of been screaming, managers and coaches have been screaming out for so long. They've gotten more substitutions and the tinkerers, and so it's almost this throwback type of mentality that no, I don't want to change anything, as opposed to most coaches and managers out there that want the opportunity and want to be given more opportunity to actually affect change on the field. But he says, no, that's not what he's doing. And look, I don't think that Vlatko Andonovski is going to continue on in the coaching capacity for this national team. I think that this is a logical conclusion to his cycle, and not for nothing, but two big tournaments, they've bombed out of both of them. And historically, they have failed. And so I think it's, as I said, I think it's just a logical thing. I don't think that his time has been unsuccessful with the national team in terms of identifying some new players. And also, to be fair to Vlatko Andonovski, he's in this weird position, and you've talked about it many times on this pod, where you have these two extremes. You have the old players who have already done that, and so there's not the urgency for them because they already have their hardware and their fame and fortune over there. And then the young ones that don't know yet, but want to do it, but there's no urgency for them because they have multiple opportunities coming forward. So it was a difficult time. He needed to transition, I think, out of that old, guard, maybe quicker than he thought he needed to do. But ultimately, the results are the only thing that matter. Here we sit today in a place that we haven't sat ever from a national team perspective in a World Cup. And certainly, given the last couple of World Cups, this is very, very early to be having these types of conversations.
Yeah, it was a bit of a mixed bag as far as the veterans. The one great success story was Julie Ertz. He brought her back late, and she ended up being a starter and a very good player at this World Cup. But then the other end of the spectrum, I thought Alex Morgan had a really lousy tournament, didn't score a goal, missed a penalty against Vietnam. Did have a nice assist in that game, but you talk about the U.S.'s failure to put the ball in the back of the net. She is the center forward. That's her job, and she didn't do it tonight.
And a lot of people had been calling for Sophia Smith to have a much more central role, and even to bring Alex off. I mean, it's the life of a goal scorer, right? You don't score, and that is a problem. And this is a U.S. team that after that first win, then went 3 ties in a row, and were not scoring goals. And today, the good part was they were creating chances, and good chances. But that's all fine and well.
And then staying on the veterans theme, Megan Rapinoe didn't add a whole lot. You thought she could be a good option off the bench in these games. And you go to the shootout, which that was a whole story in and of itself. We could really unpack that shootout because there were so many twists and turns. But Sophia Smith misses what was essentially a match point, where if she had scored, the U.S. would have advanced. So that's devastating right there. But then the other two misses were veterans, Rapinoe and Kelly O'Hara. So, you would have thought the more experienced players would have been able to step up and convert their kicks, but it didn't play out that way.
Yeah, and, these players are in a strange position. in the round of 16 and going out. And even in the interviews after the game, you heard, Alyssa Nair talking about, well, we lost the World Cup in inches or millimeters. And yes, because, that VAR moment or that, goal line technology moment that showed that it was over and Rob Stone couldn't find the sliver. The sliver was definitely there, but it was millimeters. But also, to be fair, the U.S. survived against Portugal because of millimeters, because a couple millimeters this way or that way, that goal goes in at the end, and then we're not even talking about a game against Sweden.
The odd thing about that moment with Sweden's winning kick is that the referee's body language seemed to indicate that she wasn't giving a goal because she went like that. And so, but then when the Swedish player started celebrating, then you realize, okay, I guess she did.
Well, by the letter of the laws of the game, she was actually doing what you are supposed to do, in that blowing the whistle to signify that the game is over because the goal went in.
But so I've always said that goal line technology seems to be the only thing that people don't argue. If that's what the technology says, then that's what it is. So you don't think there's any controversy there. If that's what it said, it's a goal.
There's no controversy other than the placement of the technology is done by human beings. But I'm okay with that, because once it's done, then human beings aren't interfering with it. So this can be perpetual. It can just keep going on and say, but ultimately humans have to be involved in implementing the actual technology.
Do you think that Lena Hurtig, the Swedish player that converted that kick, walked into the dressing room afterwards with a strut, like never a doubt? No problem.
I think she probably has a wry smile on her face.
Frankly, this whole Swedish team, I'm sure they know deep down that this was like a bank robbery.
Listen,
no business.
Sing while you're winning, my friend. And we saw the pictures in the locker room, and they get to go through. And, this was number 1 versus number 3 in the world. And again, this is when I go back to ruining the missed opportunities in the group stage, which is why the group stage does matter. This U.S. team backed into the round of 16, and that they showed up finally in the round of 16. Why did it take 3 games for this team to actually show up? We talked about it here, Mosse, that the question was, is this as good as it gets, or is there this incredible different team that exists behind the scenes that's magically going to appear? Well, that team did surface with some changes here and there that kind of facilitated it. But again, why did we have to wait? If that team had showed up in the first game, maybe you're scoring more goals against Vietnam, and maybe that goal difference is different. Or maybe you win the game against Portugal, or maybe you win the game against the Netherlands. But that team, there wasn't even an inkling that team existed through the group stage. And not until today did we see it. So I guess it did exist. But again, to Vlatko Andonovski, why weren't you able to access that team? Why weren't you able to give us that team during the group stage? Why did it? And maybe it's the criticism that they got. Maybe they heard that noise that they love to talk about, how they are, able to push it away. Maybe they didn't push it away. Maybe it affected them, and they said, we got to get our you-know-what together and go out there. But ultimately, it's a little too little, too late. So I don't know.
And, we talk about all the history between Sweden and the U.S. This today was reminiscent of the 2016 Olympic quarterfinals. It was a 1-1 draw, went to penalties, Sweden advanced. Remember the whole Hope Solo and Mischa Gaz with the glove? And then Hope Solo came out afterwards and blasted Sweden's approach, said they were very negative in that game. So this reminded me of that. Obviously, Sweden beat the U.S. 3-0 in the last Olympics. They handed the U.S. their last non-shootout defeat at a World Cup, which was back in the 2011 group stage. So, again, they remain the country that when they come up against the U.S. in these major tournaments, they have had some moments more than just about anybody else over the years.
All right, so how do we close this World Cup on this women's national team ultimately? I'll give you a word, and then I'll finish it up here. What are you left with after this?
Listen, you can't win them all, but the concern is there is this sense that the rest of the world is coming and they're getting better, and the U.S. needs to be able to keep up. I do think there's a lot of good young talent on this team that's going to be even better 4 years from now. And you have players like Macario and Swanson who missed this World Cup due to injury. You have to add them to the equation. So I don't think the U.S. is going to go anywhere. They're going to remain one of the top teams. But I do think the era of the U.S. being head and shoulders above the rest of the world is over, and people are going to have to get used to that.
Yeah, I mean, I do hope for good things, and in the post-mortem that is going to happen, and I think rightfully so, I do hope that we get to a point where this team is seen in a better light. And again, I think we've talked about it a couple of times here. When I think about this team right now, and so many people ask me about this team, again, don't kill the messenger, but this U.S. women's national team is polarizing. And the off-field stuff with politics and stances and causes and personalities and behavior. We've even seen it at this World Cup. As I said on air earlier, it rubs many people the wrong way, and it has made this team, for lack of a better word, unlikable. Not to everybody, but to a portion of America out there. And we even talked about the fact that there are people that tuned in today to hate watch, to see this team lose. And that's not something that I want to see of any U.S. team. And there are people who won't even watch this team. So it should come as no surprise now that I guarantee, when we wake up tomorrow, there will be those with the knives out, and there will be those that will use this, against this team and against soccer and see, I told you so. But there is a bigger problem for this team in that, and I mentioned this yesterday, this team has built their entire brand and identity on winning and being the best. And certainly going out in the round of 16 in the World Cup is not the best. And this has brought them fortune. This has brought them fame. And this has been their trump card. It's what's fueled their power and has given them their platform and their megaphone. And if it goes away, Mosse, they risk losing being relevant. And this team, you like them, you don't, they have always been relevant. And again, it goes back to that winning constantly and that power that they have. And for these women, that's not good. As a matter of fact, it's a fate worse than losing if they are not relevant. So my hope is that this team going forward is able to, like I said, unite us all in a way and be something that everybody's proud of, and everybody gets excited to watch, because there is so much good when it comes to this team, on and off the field. So this isn't a situation where it's not a complete reboot. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's wonderful players. There is a wonderful pipeline. There is a wonderful culture. Yes, it needs to be tweaked, and yes, it has to be looked at, and yes, it can improve, and yes, the rest of the world is coming. But I want all of America to celebrate this team, and I want us all to celebrate these incredible women. And hopefully they regroup, and hopefully they come back bigger, better, and stronger than ever. And they are fueled by this failure to come back and win a World Cup. And next time they do, I hope that everybody is on board. I hope that everybody is excited. And as I said, I hope everybody is proud of this team going forward, because I do think the future is bright. But it doesn't mean that just because they played this one game really, really well, that we don't go back and we look at the youth systems, and we look at what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong going forward, and who's leading it, and all of those different things.
Well, you said Vlatko Andonovski is not going to be the coach moving forward, so the question is who replaces him. I've already heard people say throw money at Serena Wigman, whatever it takes to get her. So the same conversation we've been having with the U.S. men now, coaching-wise, we're going to start to have with the women, which is going to be interesting.
And I think it's still a plum job, and now maybe it's even more enticing. Because you get to come in after the failure. And again, Vlatko Andonovski, nice guy, and as I said, it's a difficult situation to come in after winning 2 World Cups, and you've failed if you haven't at least gotten to the final. I don't think that would necessarily be right. I mean, I think if this team had gotten to the semifinals, things would have been much, much rosier. But I think that now people will look at this job and say, okay, good, because you also get to come in and you get to get rid of all the old guard, right? And you get to kind of start new. You got that young group that now is, blooded themselves in a World Cup, the Gurmas and stuff that you can go forward with. And the pressure is off, not completely off, but it's less than when you're coming in after winning 2 World Cups. All right, Mosse, we'll still talk more about this going forward, because it has to marinate a little bit.
I just want to say last thing. This was the U.S.'s 4th penalty shootout in a World Cup. And, man, you look at that list, it's the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. You have the 99 final against China at the Rose Bowl. Who can forget that? 2011 quarters against Brazil after Abby Wambach scored the most famous goal in U.S. women's national team history to equalize. But then the 2011 final against Japan, which they lost, and this defeat tonight.
It's cruel. undeniably cruel. And yet, every single time we do a tournament, and I make a point of saying that it's not a coin toss. It is not just complete chance. Penalty kicks are a skill. You research and you train and you drill. And even Vlatko Andonovski said, we've been doing this for months. It didn't show in some of the penalties in the way that they took them, but again, there is this feeling out there that this is not soccer. This is just left to the whims and the fates of the wind or of the soccer gods out there. And no, that's not true. It requires skill, and it requires skillful players, both physically and mentally, to be strong and to be able to execute in that moment despite the immense pressure. And the drama is wonderful. From a neutral standpoint, it's painful when you have a horse in the race. And so from an American perspective, it was painful when Megan skies it. But she did the same thing that Baresi did, or Baggio did, or others have done in the past. And it's in that moment, and it will forever be etched and remembered going forward. But ultimately, the only thing that matters is the U.S. is not going on. From a Fox perspective, that's not a good thing. We're not happy here that we don't have our team to continue on. But we will continue to give you the World Cup because that's what it deserves, and that's the respect that it deserves.
Did you get the email? My flight tomorrow is at 9 a.m.
We're here, baby. We're staying here. We have Australia coming tomorrow, so the home team is still in this tournament. They face Denmark. We got England coming against Nigeria. You know my thoughts on England, but I got to give it up to them. They are right up there in terms of my power rankings. Number 2, absolutely, it would not surprise me in the least if England now, especially now that the U.S. is out, I think a lot of teams are looking and saying, well, this is wide open now.
And the draw has really opened up for England. They faced Nigeria in the round of 16 and then Colombia or Jamaica in the quarterfinals. So you'd think they would get to the semis. And then down the road, it would probably be a France or Australia in the semis. And then they get to the final, one of these teams in the U.S. side of the bracket, which the 2 great games, by the way, Sweden, Japan, and Spain, Netherlands. And
now with Japan being the only team that's won a World Cup, the chances are, like you said, we're going to see something new and possibly something historic in somebody else holding that up. And that in and of itself is kind of cool. I mean, if it can't be the U.S., I'd like it to be someone who's never been there before. And I think that ultimately will be good for the tournament and would be good for the game. And we'll still give it to you, each and every day, like we promised. And there will be fallout. And there will be interesting things that come out. We're going to find out a whole lot more about what was going on behind the scenes when it comes to this U.S. women's national team in camp. You mentioned Vlatko Andonovski. I'm assuming they're going to figure out what's going on. I don't know if it's going to happen quickly or later, but there will be talk as to what the future is for this U.S. team. But we march on, my friend. Anything else before we go?
We should talk about the Netherlands-South Africa quickly,
yes,
because that was the other game today. That was a tale of 2 goalkeepers. The Dutch one, Daphne van Damsler, I thought was absolutely outstanding.
Incredible.
And then the South Africa goalkeeper had an absolute howler on the second goal by Berenstain. Jill Roord got the other Dutch goal, her 4th. She's now in that golden boot mix. So the Dutch move on. But South Africa, I thought, gave them all they could handle. They go out with their heads held high. Wonderful story. And that Thembi Kgatlana, what a player she is. Huh?
Incredible. I mean, a one-woman show to a certain extent, but every single time she got the ball, there was a potential for something magical to happen. Electric in the way that she uses her body in her the speed, but the harnessing of the speed is it's just fun to watch. I would want her on my team regardless of where or what was going on. She was wonderful, 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 and another star kind of in the making that has used this platform to make us turn and say, wow. I mentioned Naomi Girma, and we'll come out with a list at the end of this about who really impressed us, especially when it comes to young players, and Caicedo, and it goes on and on and on, that have used this World Cup, and we will say, yeah, that's where they were born, basically, from an international perspective. All right, anything else, my friend?
That's it.
All right, we will come back to you again tomorrow, as I said, as the World Cup rolls on. It's going to roll up without the U.S. This too shall pass, my friend, if you are our American fans out there watching. It hurts, and it should hurt, but onward and upward, on and off the field. We will learn from this. We will grow. And as I said before, I hope and pray that going forward that this U.S. women's national team comes back bigger and better than ever and unites us as a country and as a team that we can be proud of going forward each and every time that they step on the field, including the next time that they step on the field from a World Cup perspective, and hopefully win yet another World Cup. But it's not going to be in 2023. All right. Keep rating and writing and sending us your comments out there and subscribing and reviewing and doing all the different things that you do. Thanks always to State Farm for presenting this. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Until then, and as always, my friends, size the day.